All right. Well, there are probably going to be more people trickling in, but let's just get started because we only have an hour and I don't want to rush. So, can you see my face and my slides? That's the first question. Okay, good. I will go relatively quickly through some of these. So that's me. You can figure out my address and phone number, and I'm always available if you have any questions or you have suggestions or criticisms. I'm open for that. I also want to mention that while I am the one talking about the radios today, these two people have actually put all of the infrastructure together and our repeaters and trailers and so forth. So they deserve the credit for us having that infrastructure. And you'll see their names around a lot in our CERT community. Okay, 3 topics for today. One is talking about the radio itself. The second one is talking about the physics, not in too much detail, but it has come up that people who bought a radio and who live in San Francisco say, well, I can't hear you. This doesn't work. So we talk a little bit about that. And then communication protocols and why it's useful to be efficient and effective while communicating on these radios. Okay, let's start with the radio. Everybody has gotten, or many people have gotten these CERT radios. And what you get in the package is the little radio itself, the battery, which you insert like so. Click. It is important that you never turn the radio on without having the antenna actually screwed in. And I would suggest just leaving the antenna screwed in permanently. And the reason is the radio generates energy that it wants to radiate out. If the antenna is not attached, that energy will reflect right back into the radio and fry components. It'll heat them up and actually destroy them. So keep the antenna attached. That's always a good thing. You also get a charger, which you know how to use. You just click it in here. It has to be pretty solid, and you will see the red and the green lights pop up. You also get, this is an additional extra, a battery holder that takes 5 AA's, pretty straightforward. And that is backup. That's not our primary, but that's backup. I suggest having the 5 AA's and their lithium batteries as a recommendation. Just tape them together and have them together with your other radio gear. Now, one suggestion is not to keep the radio in the charger, but just to charge it up, and when the green light comes on, take it out and don't keep it plugged in, because that does age the battery faster. Another thing that's specific to these radios that Mark just pointed out to me is that it is better when you're not using your radio to take the battery out. And the reason is that there's a slight discharge when the battery is on and the radio is off. That's weird, but there it is. So you don't want to end up going out on a call with your battery completely discharged. So take it off and use it, put it on when you need it. And that's why it's also useful to have a Tuesday radio check-ins, because then you know whether your radio is working or not. All right, so moving along here. These radios have 2 receivers and 1 transmitter. And that's handy because you can listen to 2 channels at the same time, and you transmit on 1 channel. And when you go out on your first call, or when you get deployed, and you turn the radio on, it is on our standard WD1 and PV1 channels. Let's see whether I can show that. And the reason is that these 2 channels will always be monitored. So as you drive towards our incident command center or towards your location, these 2 channels will always be monitored. And even if you can't receive one, you're likely to be able to receive the other one. So that's useful to keep those 2 channels as you turn the radio on, just like it is. So you can always hear somebody and communicate with somebody at the incident command post. There are reasons to change the channels later on. I'll talk about that a little more. And you can only transmit on 1 channel. And so let's talk about what the radio buttons do. Some of you are very familiar with this, so I apologize if this is duplication. So you turn on the radio with this button, the outermost button. Let me see. I want to make sure you see me. Yep. The outermost button here, there's a click sound at the end, and that turns the radio off. And volume is just, that means it's happy and it's turned on. You have a channel selector dial in the middle. And we'll talk about which channels you have in a moment, but that's changing the channel here. Switch back to my slides. You have the push to talk button here. We actually call it push then talk because the radio takes a little bit of time. Actually, the repeaters take a little bit of time to notice that you want to transmit. So what you want to do is after you've thought about what you say, you click the button and you wait about a quarter of a second or a little bit, and then you start talking, because otherwise, whatever you say immediately after you press the button will not be heard by the other side. So give yourself a little time. Okay, now we start getting into the interesting territory. You do see, let's see, on this radio here, we do have a AB button right here. And that AB button switches, as you can see, the little arrow. And the little arrow shows which of the channels you are transmitting on. You can only transmit on one channel. You can receive both channels at the same time. So when you want to talk on, what is it, PV1, then the little arrow is on PV1 right now. If I click the button again, it's on WD1. And it's useful to know so you don't transmit on the wrong channel. So just check yourself doing that. Now, if you have two channels and you're supposed to transmit, let's say you're talking to PV1, and then suddenly Woodside 1 becomes super busy because they have something going on and it's really, really busy, and you can't concentrate because whatever you want to say is interrupted by Woodside 1. What you can do is you can turn the channel you're not transmitting on, you can turn that off. So you basically mute it. And so you use this SD button that's for single dual receive. When I press that button, at the moment you see I have both receive channels on, WD1 and PV1. I press it. Now only PV1 is on. Do you see that? So now you're only listening to PV1 and you're also transmitting on PV1. And now this is useful when the other channel is just too busy and you're going to get confused what's going on. You switch back by just pressing this button again, you listen to both. When you're in single mode, you can also switch channels by just pressing AB. Hopefully that makes sense so far. You can also switch channels with the channel selector button. Just go down here. Usually you won't do that. It's much faster to use the dial up on the top. And that has something that has happened recently. People have put their radios in a backpack, or it's been on the side of the car. It's been moved. Somebody has touched either the buttons or the channel selector switch at the top, and the settings have changed. And so you don't hear anything anymore because you might be on the wrong channel. To prevent that, you can press and hold this button at the lower right that says lock keyboard in the slide. And that'll prevent the keyboard from being pressed and changing any settings. So hopefully that will prevent that particular accident from happening in the future. It's actually in a recent deployment we've had that. Okay, so I won't go over that too much. I'll just say this is a repetition of what I just talked about. AB switches between transmission on the first or the second channel. Single dual switches between receiving both or receiving only one channel. One thing that's perhaps useful to note also is if you see the busy bars at the bottom, that means somebody else is currently transmitting, even if you don't hear anything because they may have the button pressed down, but it's silent on there at the moment. Do not cut in at that point because you may not be heard or you may interrupt their transmission. So just quickly do a check that the channel isn't busy before you press the button. All right, I'll do a quick bonus round on the radio features. If you take your radio, and everybody who has their radio in front of them has it, change the channels. You can change the channels one way, which is up, and then of course you can change them down too. These radios have, I think, 199 channels capacity total. We haven't used all of them. Okay. We have pre-programmed a whole bunch of them, and I'll talk a little bit about the channel lineup. But if you dial down, you see something called WX7, WX6, and so forth. And those are NOAA weather channels. They're always transmitting, and they're always giving you the weather in your local area. So that is very convenient. Pick one that you hear noise on. They use different ones in different areas. Okay. Did you know that also your radio has an FM receiver? You can actually receive FM broadcasts with this thing. Perhaps less useful. More useful is the capability to use the flashlight. So if you click the lower button, this button right down here, the little one, then you instantly have a flashlight. Now, don't use that too long and don't keep it on because you want to keep your battery for your radio transmissions, but it is there and it's handy. Okay, moving along. Whoops. These radios are somewhat fragile pieces of equipment, and they don't like mud and water and dirt. And so you can just put this in your backpack, and you can get one of these extension cables with a radio, just like the police guys have it, and you just clip that on here. It's like 20 bucks or something. That can be handy. There's also a car adapter. These are both from Amazon, and the links are in there if you want to use them. When we did sandbagging the last time, it was clear that that's a problem when your fingers are full of sand. Sometimes you're wearing gloves, and somebody calls you on the radio, and you have to get it out of your pocket with a wet, sandy hand. The radios don't look great after that, so that's why I'm bringing that up. All right, yeah, that was the basics of your radio operation. Any questions so far? And actually, I will do questions and answers at the end as well. So if something comes up, just put it down on paper and we'll get to it. Next, we'll talk about the physics of radio and why these radios can't really do impossible things. So the range is one important thing. We're used from our phones that we can basically talk to anybody in the world. What we don't consider is that there's a lot of stuff in between our phone and the other person's phone that has to be alive and working and energized in order to make that happen. These do not depend on any of that. If you have a walkie-talkie and the other person has a walkie-talkie and you have a direct connection, there's nothing in between necessary. No cell towers, no internet, no routers, nothing. And that's a bonus. That's why it's robust backup infrastructure. But it also means you can only communicate with whatever power these little radios have. And just like a light bulb, they're rated in watts. So this can output up to 5 watts, which is a very dim light bulb. And in our terrain, I would say they probably have a 1 to 3 mile radius. Some people call them handy talkies, HTs, or walkie talkies. You might have heard the term. So the simplest operation is basically you beam out when you talk, you beam out a certain amount of radio energy, and Bob here is in your range, is in that energy envelope, and he can hear you. And likewise, when Bob pushes his button, you can hear him. That is a very simple form of communication. We call it actually simplex because it is so simple. And you click on the button, the energy reaches them. They click on the button, energy reaches you. 1 to 3 miles maximum. So that's why somebody in Menlo Park or in Redwood City or in San Francisco will not be able to communicate with us using these radios. You have to be in range. So when Bob is too far away, he's not going to be able to communicate with Alice and vice versa. So we also have the extra issue that if there's stuff in between Alice and Bob, like buildings or trees, any organic matter, or fog, clouds, water, mountains, terrain, all of these prevent radio waves from going as far as they normally would. So that will only shorten the range. And that's a problem because, of course, we have a lot of, we're not in Arizona, we have a lot of terrain here and we have a lot of trees here. So in order to solve that problem, our radio gods here, our local radio gods, have installed what's called a repeater, several repeaters. And those are things with big antennas and powerful transmitters. I mentioned these have 5 watts, the little radios. Our transmitters have 50 watts plus, so a lot more. So we put a transmitter on top of a mountain, and now Alice beams up to she cannot reach Bob directly, as you can see, but she can reach the repeater. And the repeater retransmits with a lot more power to everybody around. So Bob can now hear what Alice is saying through the repeater. There you go. And because there's 2 things involved, we call that duplex. There's a repeater and Alice involved. Anyway, this is terminology. It doesn't matter to keep that in mind. But if somebody says simplex channels, we'll come back to that later. We mean the simple version, and duplex we mean repeater version. Okay. Well, so we have several of these repeaters. Two of them are fixed. The WD1 repeater. Let's see whether I go back to my slides here. WD1 repeater is in Emerald Hills, actually pretty close to the fire station there. The PV1 repeater is up here in Batola Valley at Ray's house. And then we have a portable, a trailer that Ray has built and that is equipped with a giant mast, and it's currently stationed at our Patola Valley fire station, but it can be deployed and towed anywhere where it is needed and where we might need reception. So that's our repeater infrastructure here for WPV-CERT. And just to give you an idea, we use these maps that tell us what areas can be reached, in this case, red, from a particular repeater, because we're so wavy here in our landscape that we have a lot of occlusions. And that's why we also regularly test whether our signals from the repeaters and from the little walkie-talkies can be received. And that's part of the reason why we do, not just for training and exercise, but also to see whether the radio infrastructure is operational. We test every Tuesday. Okay, so here's a puzzle, and that came from a recent buyer of the radio. Said, hey, I could hear everybody, but nobody could hear me. How is that possible? Well, here's the actual picture. Say Bob is on Skyline, Alice is in Woodside. Alice can reach the repeater. The repeater blasts out the signal. Bob can hear it. Fantastic. Bob can hear it. And now he wants to answer. And now Bob transmits, but see how far his signal goes? It doesn't reach the repeater. So Bob is never repeated and Bob is never heard. And so this is one of the reasons why you may be able to receive a signal and hear people, but you may not be able to talk. So that you know that now. And what can you do to make things better? Well, one of the things is to maybe go outside your car, reduce the number of obstructions, go in an opening. Sometimes it's not so easy. Go on a high spot. And the other thing to mention here is that the radiation pattern of these radios is like a bagel. So the energy, think of the bagel that's projected here. And that's where the energy goes. So right below and right above the antenna, zero signal. So if you're in a third-story building and your partner is down in the first story and you try to press transmit, chances are they may not even hear you. That's the only case where you might want to hold the radio in this position. Otherwise, this is the position, vertical, that you want to hold the radio, because that gets the most horizontal coverage for the radio signal to propagate. The microphone for this thing is right here. Actually, am I showing my face? No, I should show that. The microphone is right here. It's a tiny little hole. So make sure that that's not obstructed and you don't have your finger on it, because that also doesn't work. You don't need to shout. Be about this far away from your face. And remember to push, then wait, then talk. Okay. And then during our Tuesday check-ins, we often have people walk outside or walk to the back of their yard, or just find a different spot where just to see whether the radio might be receiving better from that spot and transmitting better. That's another reason for our Tuesday check-ins. All right. Good. Next, we'll talk about communication protocols and why it's important to have these protocols, because the ability to communicate in an emergency is really the first step towards figuring out what to do next and getting all the volunteer resources organized. So it's really important that communication, A, works, and B, is efficient. We are sharing these channels, Woodside 1 and PV1 repeater channels, and they're shared resources. We can't all talk, unlike the internet. We can't all talk at the same time. And so it's important that the communications are both efficient in the sense that they're fast and you brief, so that we don't take up too much time on the channel. And they're also effective, so that we use precise language and we have a certain way of communicating with each other so that we don't lose information. All right. Couple of things that I have myself learned on these exercises that we've done in the past years. And actually, if we do one again, I highly recommend, if you can, join these exercises. It'll be amazing how much practical knowledge and respect for certain procedures that may seem, a little bit theoretical, how they actually impact practical communications is very handy. I learned a lot. So one thing is, when we send out teams from the incident command center, they will get a team name. You don't use your own name. You don't say, hi, it's Robert. You have a team name, and it'll usually be quite short. And again, the reason is you want to be efficient. And you use that name. So if somebody else takes over your radio on your team, it's still the same team name. You'll be getting that team name from the ICP when they send you out. So it could be Team 101, or it could be MedOps, or it could be Logistics 2, or whatever. The team lead assigns a radio person. Now, some leads want to do it all themselves. I think that's probably not the best use of the resources, because team leads need to have an overlook of the situation and delegate tasks and make sure everybody is safe and figure out what to do next. And so you already have a scribe on your team. My recommendation would be, and Mark chime in here, and Chip, if that's not correct, but to have maybe the scribe do the communication as well, because they have a piece of paper in front of them, so they can write down what they receive. It's not always going to be immediate when you send for information. When you ask a question, you're not going to get the answer typically right away, because ICP, the command post, is very busy, and there's probably 5 other people stacked in front of you that need answers. So it's good to write things down, and it's good not to be distracted and interrupted by the radio. So my recommendation would be that somebody else, rather than the team lead, is actually functioning as the radio person. Listen before you transmit. I know that sounds really obvious, but it is important. We've had during our exercises also people going, yeah, and then I think we should, no, wait. So that basically blocks the channel for everybody else from communicating. So what you want to do is think, that's actually my wife's advice also, think before you speak, and preferably have all the information ready. So again, if the scribe, if you're the team lead and you tell the scribe, tell them we have 3 medical emergencies here. We have, one needs immediate attention. Write that down, and then the scribe will call and figure out and communicate with ICP on what to do next. And then you can deal with the actual medical emergency. Yeah, minimize airtime. It's a shared channel, and so we want to talk as little as possible, but still be effective. And we also try not to use jargon. It'll slip in sometimes. You'll hear it on a Tuesday night. People will say, oh, 5 by 9, or you're doubling, and things like that. And some of these we can explain as we go. There's a lot more jargon from the ham radio community that nobody will understand. Hey, I did a QSO with Taiwan and 47 or 71, and nobody understands that. So we try not to use that stuff. We try to use human language. Okay, couple more things. Again, these come out of exercises that we did. We do not want victim names, in fact, any names probably, over the radio. These radios are basically public domain. Everybody can listen to our transmissions. There's nothing encrypted on here. So we, for privacy reasons and for safety reasons, we do not want to give out what's happened to whom. It may be necessary to share some of that information, but usually we do not do it over the radio. We also do not spell, because it takes too long usually, but it is always good to repeat back, whether you are the receiver of information or you're transmitting, to make sure that the other side has fully copied what you have said and there wasn't a misunderstanding. It's not It's not Welsh Avenue, it's Welsh Road, for example, and things like that. So here are a couple of communication examples to keep it nice and short. During our last exercise, I think this was during that was the last fall class, we had and Bev knows this because she was incident command post. We had the situation we needed to communicate how many people were in what condition and needed what kind of help. And so in CERT, we have very clear color codes for what condition of victims, right? We have red, yellow, green, black. And so in the shortest instance, when you just want to give a summary of what's going on, you give the address and you see, and you enumerate what victims you have. You don't tell that it's a 12-year-old laceration on the upper right-hand ankle, and that's too much information. Command post needs, if they want a summary, they just want basically the count of the reds, yellows, and greens, because they will use that to figure out what other resources they have to send or to schedule. And when you talk about specific victims, we just talk about age, male, female, quick summary, and how urgent they need help. So be concise. And this is best trained in practice. So when we do an exercise, but I'm just bringing it up here because you really can't be too lengthy in your descriptions. It also doesn't matter. The command post doesn't really care whether it's on the left or the right foot or whatever. They need to know whether they need to get an ambulance dispatched or the person can get themselves to medical. All right, so here's an example. The standard way of communicating is not to just start talking. But specifically, if you're on a mobile team and you want a command post to know something, you can't just push the button down and start talking. Command post may be busy with 15 other things. So what you first do is you ping them. Then you wait until they come back. Then you talk. And then you read back. So here's an example of that. Say you are a team 104, mobile team. You're out and about. And the other side is the incident command post. So first you say ICP 104. That means, hey, command post, this is team 104. I'd like to tell you something. ICP 104. That's super short, right? Now, command post will be getting 5 of these a minute. So they're very busy. You wait, and this could be quite a bit of wait time, until command post comes back with something like 104, go for ICP. Tell me about what you want to talk. So that basically means 104, I'm listening to you now. Please talk to me. I'm ICP. ICP, we have 2 delayed and 1 immediate at 123 Oak Drive and need medical transport. Okay, good. ICP says copies and reads back the information. And that's the usual flow. So we do have that ping in the beginning. We wait for the, okay, I'm listening now. Then we do the communication, and then there's a read back. That goes the other way too, by the way. You know, the mobile team may be quite busy with something at the moment. You're lifting a victim or something. So ICP isn't just going to blast back information at you unless basically your scribe says, okay, I'm ready to listen now. This is an important protocol, and this is useful for us to train when we do our exercises. That's the ping, that's the talk, that's the read back. The read back is really important to avoid misunderstandings because any errors propagate deeply into the system. For example, we've had one during last exercise where somebody had copied down at the command post, won't say who it was, although you're looking at him, the address wrong, and that went into the system. It was written down, you know, we needed somebody to dispatch, I forget what it was, a tree down or something like that. And I had misheard the road. And so I wrote that down wrong, didn't copy it back. And it went on a piece of paper and went into the command post way past many minutes later. Somebody came back, says, hey, we dispatched somebody to that address, but there's, you know, that address doesn't exist. So it was a waste of time. What are you doing? So quite asynchronously, things can trickle down and go wrong when you don't correct the information immediately. That's why the read back is important. All right, when do you talk? That's part of the effective communication strategy. When you're in a mobile team and you're called by ICP, then you respond. You don't just chatter with ICP randomly. When help or support is needed on the mobile team, definitely call ICP. When you have an assignment and mobile teams get sent out with something in mind, go block that road or go help those victims or go do a windshield survey on Westridge or whatever. When the assignment is completed, then call ICP telling them, this assignment is completed, we're ready for next assignment, or come back to ICP. It's important because ICP needs to know where you are. And also when you go off assignment, so you see something else that requires immediate attention, like there's an accident or there's a fire next to the road on the way to your assignment, you call in and when you say we're off the assignment, and you tell ICP what you're doing, because ICP expects you to continue and complete your assignment, otherwise not hearing anything else. The other thing to do, this is from the Zots to Tots recently, is to periodically check your radio, because you may not be in the reception area anymore, or something may have happened with the repeater or the simplex channels. And so make sure from time to time, if you don't hear anything for a while, you can do a radio check. Just call in and say 104 ICP radio check, and they will call you back if they hear you. And if they don't hear you, you have to debug that. You have to go on a different channel. You have to go and try make sure that your radio is set correctly, and so forth. Okay, let's talk a little bit about specifically our Portola Valley Incident Command Post. This is our town center. Our ICP room typically will be here. I forget what name of the room it is, but anyway, that's the location of the ICP room. We have a sign-in desk in front where, in CERT, we always want to know where our resources are and who is here and who is signed in and who's signed out. So there will be somebody checking you in. When you're checked in, you're not going to the ICP room. ICP room is super busy and they can't have people walking in and out and answering questions for those people. So you'll be in the ready room, which is right next door. Our PV logistics trailer is on the other side of the soccer field, and that'll be unlocked and ready, and the logistics team lead will control that. And you may be called in to get a generator, a battery, whatever. And then likely the medical area, because it's nearby, could be here. This could all change as circumstances evolve, but that's kind of a default. All right, channels and teams. Let's see what we're doing on time. Yeah, we have time. When you get activated and you turn on your radio and you drive after having checked your family, your house, your neighborhood, and so forth, and everything is okay, then you take your radio, turn it on, you listen to PV1 and WD1. If on the way you discover anything of importance, you call that in. Otherwise, you check in with ICP. ICP will, and you go into the ready room, you sign in and you go in the ready room. And then ICP will assign teams and channels for you to use to talk to ICP. It may not be that you are on the WD1 or PV1 channel. We have a bunch of other ones. But you'll be assigned a channel, and you'll be asked to tune your radio to that channel. When you're on a mobile team, you want to maintain at least one channel back to ICP. That's the one you were assigned to. You can certainly listen to, another one like WD1, for example. But if you're on a mobile team and several other people in your team have another radio, for example, you are supposed to do windshield surveys, and somebody walking up a driveway to make sure that, to check the house, whether it's collapsed or it's standing, or you hear something or smell gas or whatever. You don't all walk in, but you have a member of your team or two walk in, look, and then they can be on what's called a simplex channel. And so I'll give you the channel lineup later, but we have some channels that are called tactical channels. I think we have 1 to 9, 1 to 6. And you can tune those, and those are direct without a repeater to somebody nearby. Remember, we talked about simplex communication. That is somebody in range. So your team is never going to be more than a few hundred feet away from you. So that'll easily be covered by the simplex means of communication with the radio. So you could have, when you're deployed, you could have one channel listening to ICP, the one channel you were assigned to, and the other channel on a tactical channel. So that's a reason for having two listening channels here as well, because you want to listen to your team members, then you also want to listen to command. And ICP may actually assign different channels to talk to different teams, like medical or logistics. So don't assume that just because you are a mobile team and there are 3 other mobile teams that you can all hear each other. That may not be the case. All communication is routed through ICP, and there's at least 1 or 2 people, maybe more, listening to all these channels and dispatching and transmitting information. But be aware that you may not hear other mobile teams. You may, but you may not. Depends on what the channel settings are. So the radio is this is a lot more information that you really care about, but I'm just mentioning it. We have a bunch of channels programmed into these radios. You're familiar with channel 1, 2, 3, 4, Woodside 1, PV1. We have a trailer frequency. I'm mentioning these just so that you know that they're there, but you usually won't use them. You will get assigned a channel from ICP. Let me put that back to here. The tactical channels are the ones that are labeled CTAC. And then above them, we have some other channels. Usually, you won't need any of those. You'll be told by ICP what your main channel is, and then you can use tactical amongst each other if you need that. The radio has a bunch of other channels. You should only be listening to these other channels. You can explore them by just dialing around. They're there. You don't transmit on those channels. We're only supposed to transmit on the channels that are kind of in the blue box here. And as I said, as you dial down rather than up, the NOAA weather channels are there for you. All right. Okay, finished. Gives us some time to Q&A. I hope that wasn't too fast. A lot of this you will have heard at least once before, but I thought it would be useful to cover it again, because repetition is a good way to keep learning. So let's open it up for Q&A. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry, I covered the slides. That's a really bad thing of me. This is the first time I try this, Kurt, sorry about that. I tried this overlay.
Yeah, that's better.
Sorry about that. I do have the link to the slide. So if you, like, there were a bunch of URLs and channel listings. I don't expect you to write that down, of course. So the slides are available as a PDF, and the link to those was in the same post that you got the Zoom link for. It's at the bottom of that post. So if you want to look at any of the slides, go click on that link, you get the PDF.
Robert, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Kathy. Hi, Robert. Thank you. That was really informative. And I actually pre-read the slides, and I still got a lot out of hearing you read them and explain it all. So thank you for that. I do have a little confusion about when you can't transmit back. You were showing the slide with Alice and Bob was not able to communicate. Say, for instance, you're having this communication and all of a sudden there's an object, whether it's a house or a mountain or a distance. What do you do in that situation? How do you get back to communicating, being able to send Bob to Alice a communication?
Yeah. One thing you can try is to get your radio signal less obstructed. That sounds easier than it is. But if you're in a car, for example, if you're driving around, you're going somewhere and everything's working fine. And we did this the other day. I was driving up here where I live, it's Westridge area, and then down into Ladera. And the Alpine Road Ladera channel is actually surrounded on both sides by terrain. And so it's actually pretty bad reception. I was in the car and Mark was on the other side, said, I can't hear you anymore. I can't hear you anymore. I could hear him. He couldn't hear me anymore. So I stopped the car and I got out of my car, because the car is a giant metal box that actually reduces signal strength going out as well. And when you get out of the car, you have a little bit more extra signal, and that may help already. The other thing you can do is, if you're inside the house, step outside the house. If you are in the middle of bushes or trees, water is basically what stops radio waves, and all plants have a lot of water in them. So if you get into a clearing, that can help. And certainly, if you think that the location is just completely dead, you can't hear anything, then if available, find a spot that's a little bit higher, because that usually will allow the waves to find the repeater more easily. Those are all the tricks I have, other than if, for example, you are in Portola Valley and you are on Woodside 1, listening to Woodside 1, you may not, you may be too far away from Woodside 1 based on whatever the parameters are. Then switch to transmitting on PV1 and try transmitting from the other repeater. That's why we have two repeaters that are actually spatially distant, in the attempt that we basically cover the area at least from two angles.
Okay, that sounds very logical, and I recall you saying some of those things. I imagine it's just gonna, I'll need to hear it a few more times to like commit it to memory. But I wonder, say for instance, I've just gotten too far, because you said Bob was he's transmitting 5 miles or something like that, and the receiver or the big radio tower can go 50. My question is, could I communicate with another radio? Like, say for instance, there was a third person, there's Bob, there's Alice, and say for instance, there's Mark, and Mark is within that range. Can he hear me? Or is it, I wonder if I'm making this more complicated.
Yeah, no, it's possible. The only thing that you have to kind of be on the same channel. You have to be lucky to be on the same channel, so to speak. It's possible that somebody else can hear you. I'll make it too complicated.
Robert, can I chime in for just 2 seconds?
Please go.
So these are great questions, and there's the concept of using a relay. So as you've brought up, if someone can hear you that can pass on your message, then they can relay your message. Now, when we use our repeaters, the problem is that, again, not going into too detailed here, if you're on the repeater channel, the other stations aren't going to hear you because your signal isn't getting to the repeater in the first place to get amplified by the repeater. If you're on a simplex channel, there's no repeater involved. And so you could have 5 people out in the field and you could say, hey, Ann, do you hear me? Yeah, Ann, I can't hear Bob. So pass the message on to Bob. Bob, pass the message on to Charlie. That's going to work. But in the repeater world, it gets a little more complicated. And we do have something called talk around channels, which if you were looking at the channel plan, WD1 and PV1 have WD1 TA and PV1 TA channels. And essentially what that does is it's called talk around, because now you're taking the repeater out of the link. So if you're, let's say, 10 miles from the repeater and you're not getting into the repeater, but somebody else is 4 miles from the repeater, but you guys are close enough, then you could switch to the talk around channel and you could say, hey, if anybody can hear me, this is Mark, I'm on talk around WD1. Can you please relay a message? So this is a pretty advanced topic to go into, but it's a great question. And so there's solutions to it. It does become something you would need to practice and understand a little bit more of the details of the difference between a simplex relay, which is just simply somebody can hear me and they can pass the message on, versus doing this with a repeater where you have to switch to a different channel.
Thank you.
Thank
It
you.
is a bit more complex, yeah. So and also it has to be trained. This is not. It would get too complicated if you just switched to a different channel and didn't know what you were doing. But it might be something we can cover in a future exercise. Several questions are around Skyline and Kings Mountain, because people there have a hard time, depending on where they are, because they're far away and they're still in the forest, contacting us. We currently, and Mark, please talk about that. We currently do not have repeater infrastructure up there, right?
I have all down this.
We don't have the Skyline SK1 repeater up yet. No.
So the only thing I can think of as far as recommendation goes for up there is what's called a mobile radio. And those are, you need a ham license to be able to operate those. Hope I'm not talking out of line here, but you can put those in a car or in your house, and they're allowed to transmit at much higher power than these little walkie-talkies, up to 50 watts as well. And so some of us have them in our cars, for example, and there's a antenna mounted in the car on the outside. And there's a good chance that even though your walkie-talkie won't be able to hear Woodside 1 or PV1 or transmit to those repeaters, a mobile radio, which is it's like a little box, it's like a shoe box, has the same functionality as the walkie-talkie, but it's not that portable. It needs to be connected to a 12-volt power source, so it's not battery driven, and it has a much stronger output, capable of transmitting further. So that might be an interim solution until we have repeater infrastructure up in Skyline and Kings Mountain. Hopefully that answers Scott's and Bev's question.
Yeah.
Question?
Oh.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much for this, by the way. This is great. I've never done the Tuesday night radio check, and I was wondering if you could just maybe go over how that works and what to expect and what we should be doing and not doing.
Sure. It's very informal, by the way, and there's multiple reasons for doing it. I mentioned, getting to know our radios, but there's also getting to know the other people, getting to know a little bit of the chat and the latest, what's happening with our infrastructure. There's also the where around and in my house do I receive and transmit the best. And that's very specific. It could be because you have a lot of metal in your house that inside your house, it doesn't work very well. But then you go outside on your deck or into your garden, ta-ra, things work. So that makes you think that when there is an emergency, power goes out, you've just heard everything rumble and all your cabinets are falling over. You turn on your radio and you go outside. Well, you're probably outside already, there's an earthquake, but you go outside to listen to WD1 and PV1 on your radio rather than listening from inside. Because from the Tuesday check-ins that that's the best. You hear the best and you transmit the best from there. So as far as protocol goes, it's much less formal on our Tuesday night check-ins. Basically, we just we start on WD1 at 7:30, so it's in about 10 minutes. We'll turn on the radios. You make sure that your little arrow is on the WD1, and then there'll be a roll call. Usually there's somebody who's responsible for leading the check-in. Tonight it'll be me. We rotate that every week. It's somebody else. And I'll be calling around for people to check in. And so you press the button, you wait a little bit, and you say, "Hi, this is Mika from, let's say, I don't know where you are, but Skyline or, Vista Verde."
Yeah.
Westridge, very good. And then I will say, very good, Mika, I heard you. I'll write you down as checked in, right? And usually then you can also say, well, there's a lot of noise tonight. I don't know, but let me go outside and try it again. So we'll do a little bit of that. And we'll go around. Sometimes it's just 3 people. Sometimes it's 10 people that check in. It varies also by weather. So if we have a lot of rain or fog, the reception is less strong. We've had interference in the past where some other signal was flooding us with with interference. So that's useful to know also, because if that's a systematic problem, then we have to figure out where that signal's coming from and solve for that. In the recent past, Mark has installed a new type of antenna on our Woodside 1 repeater that beams the signal and listens, has ears more towards our area than all around, because previously the antenna was beaming out everywhere. So in the direction of the East Bay and the water. And so that energy was basically lost, not for our purposes useful. And with the new antenna, we get much better signal. So in the Tuesday check-ins, we noticed that already it's much better. And so that's another reason for doing the check-ins. Our infrastructure changes over time, and sometimes minor changes, sometimes big changes like a new antenna. And so making sure that everything's still working is a good thing.
And is there anything that I need to do to make sure I don't step on other people, or
you
just
will?
that
So
happens
what'll happen is you'll press the button. If you're stepping on somebody, they're already transmitting, depending on who has a stronger signal. You may not be heard, and then I will not come back and say, hey, Miki, I heard you. And then you just try again when there's a bit of radio silence later. And we do 10 minutes of WD1, and then we'll switch over to PV1, and that means the same people, it's fine. You can check for both repeaters from your location by just switching the AB to the other channel, and then you go through the same exercise. Hello, hello. And when you're stepping on each other, sometimes, depending on the strength of the signal, the other person will basically cut over the first person. Sometimes the other person will just not be heard at all. So yeah, that's how that works. There's a fair amount of repetition in there, because as everybody checks in at the same time, there is some, stepping on each other.
And Robert, it's worth mentioning the concept of mic fright, which is the simple idea that some people are nervous to get on the radio, nervous to push the button and start talking. This is the absolute best way of getting on the radio, because we are here to practice. We have lots of people of different skill sets. And if you step on somebody, congratulations, you just did that like everyone else just did. So it's an opportunity to learn and have fun with it, make sure you understand how to work it in case we ever need it. And it's really just meant, and we designed this specifically to test the system, but also welcome people to join us on the radio that are not willing to take the step to become an amateur radio, ham radio operator, which is a much higher standard with tests and all this stuff. There's no tests. We just want you to get on the radio. So if we want to talk to you in an emergency, you know how to do it. So, don't be concerned about practicing. And one of the things I like to do, and every operator has a different way they want to run the net. Some are a little bit more formal, some are a little bit more informal. I personally like to make it a little more informal. So I usually have a silly question of the day, or I'll put my 10-year-old daughter on the radio, and she'll ask the question, what was your favorite Thanksgiving dinner dish, or whatever. And then we can have a little dialogue. So instead of just saying, oh, you checked in, thanks, and then you only spoke once on the radio, we can have a little back and forth between each person so that they get more comfortable. We can have a couple little banter about, okay, yeah, I like the cranberry sauce. What do you like? I like the stuffing. Okay, cool. Your signal's great. Radio's working well tonight. Thank you for checking in. So, yeah.
Kurt, to
I will
Robert.
take that under advisement and do exactly that in about 5 minutes. So have your food answers ready.
Kurt to Robert.
Come in, Kurt.
Just checking. Question for in neighborhood communication, since it's unlikely that there's going to be more than one CERT member in a neighborhood, as we take care of our neighborhoods first. What are your thoughts on communications within the neighborhood? We've been using just the family radio walkie-talkies set to a certain channel, but are there any other ideas about that?
Yes, this has actually come up recently, because some of our neighborhoods, specifically the ones that are naturally more isolated because they have only 1 or 2 roads and they're far away, namely Skyline, for example, or Vista Verde, Los Troncos, already have their own pretty well organized neighborhood watches with radios and backups and monthly check-ins and maybe even some supplies. So what we are doing is figuring out whether we have certs in that area that are trained and that have radios that can act as a relay towards the command post, but also know about the local procedures and available resources. So I actually have recently made a map. Should I bring that up? Yes, so it is important to know where our certs are so that we can figure out whether we have a cert in a particular area that we may actually, so to speak, deputize as a relay between the local neighborhood that's already organized and doing things and the main cert command post. We have started talking about that. I would say do not change your procedures right now. We are generally encouraging as many people as we can to take the full cert training because there is useful information in the full training, but we realize that takes time and effort, and so not everybody will be able or willing to invest that. But if we have relay certs, so to speak, that are trained, that know about our radios, our channels, our communication repeaters, and so forth, they can use the family radio systems that Skyline and Vista Verde are using, and then relay over our cert radios to us. Mark, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that we would hope that neighborhoods don't go down a route of trying to organize a local radio network unless they're really looking for a lot of work that might not have as much benefit as just simply having folks in that neighborhood take the CERT training and be part of our larger network, which is much more developed. We have training sessions like this one that Robert has so wonderfully put together. In the past, there tends to be a push to set up something locally, and we generally discourage that because that's a response side of our program. And based on our many years of experience, it's been unsuccessful because of the amount of training and organization required to do it. And so I think we're much all better off with our CERT model versus having local neighborhoods trying to set up radio networks when that's much harder than people think.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead.
Hey, this is Jeff Klutsky. I'm Bev Scott's husband. I am ham licensed for many, many years. We also have a GMRS license ourselves. We have our own equipment in addition to Bev being certified. What is the access policy for non-emergency use of PV1, PV2, WD1, and WD2?
I'll let Mark talk about that.
So those resources are in place for any testing that you would like to do or training purposes. So they're not really meant for, casual conversations for fun. But if they're not in use in an emergency or on a scheduled event, you are more than welcome to use them if you want to test their capacity and their coverage. Feel free. They're up and running 24/7, 365. So
that's really what it comes down to, is understanding. We're up on Skyline, so understanding where we're likely to hit which repeater is very valuable to us. We've got CP650 up at the Kings Mountain Fire Station that we can use locally.
Yeah, please feel free to test it. Absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah, and look at the channel chart. If you're a ham, you will know what offsets and wide narrow FM and DTCSs and all that stuff is. That's why I put it in. Yeah, and also join the Portola Valley Amateur Radio Club, NVN, at rothrockfamily.com. Ray Rothrock is running that.
Okay.
In fact, the NVN check-in is usually right after we do our Tuesday CERT check-in, so at 7:45 or so.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, with that, I think we are going to say goodbye here. At least I'm going to mute myself because I'm going to turn this radio on now.
Robert,
Yeah, Kathy.
apologize. I was waiting for you all to finish. I accidentally locked my I hit the little key button at the bottom.
Okay.
How do you unlock it?
You click it again.
Push and hold.
Thank you. Wasn't holding it long enough. Thank you. And it seems to have given like a countdown of numbers at one point. What did that mean? Like when you just hit.
Stand by for the WD1 radio net starting with Robert as net control in just a minute.
Yeah, actually, that's interesting because it's
more
different
information
on
than
my radio. Yeah. Click and hold. I will have to get back to you on that. I assumed it was the exact same on as on my radio, which is a slightly different version of the Wushin radio. I will owe you that answer. I don't have it for you right now.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Another time.
Yeah. Okay, let me dial in. Here we go. Okay, I will mute myself here, but you'll hear me other way.
Thanks, Robert.